All right. Just, wait for some people to join.
Like every week. Like didn't I just say I was like, oh, it's episode 56 and now it's episode 60 already. I feel like it's just we skipping numbers. Like what's going on?
Oh, time just moves really fast, huh?
Next week's gonna be like episode 84.
Yeah. Well, yeah, moves fast, So,
Yeah. A lot of what we've covered in the last I don't know, couple episodes, speaking of which has just been like how to close your, I guess, quote unquote first brand direct wholesale account. I think that the principles a lot of the times apply. It's we talk about there, any account that you close, right, is just like the principles apply no matter what. If it's a potential six-figure profit, or if it's one SKU that's going to make you a couple $100 a month, like they all start the same exact way. And it's just about how you dance and how you play around with that emotional element of it with the brand that dictates the conversation.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, right now we are traveling to actually meet with two brands. So just so people know, like we practice what we preach. It's like when is it appropriate to actually do that and go like meet a brand, because it's not something you want to do just like on a whim, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, everything within this business in general it's always been very apparent when it's time to do something. And I think you just get that feel from doing things, enough, right? It's you,
You laughing at the
yeah, no, you get that feel eventually where it's like you just know when it's losing it over.
No, I was laughing at what you said before you hopped on here, but sorry, continue. I'm starting to lose focus here. We're on PST, Pacific time. It's like throwing me off, throwing me for a loop. Um, but yeah, go ahead. What were you saying?
I just, it's like, especially when we went from like arbitrage to wholesale and things like that, it's, when it's time to switch, to focus on anything because there just becomes a point, especially with brand direct and all of that, is that you just get an emotional feeling that it's time to move. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. I mean, this applies to sales in general. So whether you're doing Amazon brand direct, whatever you're doing, it's like it's the ability to read the prospect that you're, working with. So it's like with the brands, like these are deals that have been in the pipeline, that we've been pushing and just, you know, providing information and just kind of being there when the brand needs you. And like that's what we always say. It's like the more you can following up is not just emotion. It's like you want to actually follow up with persistence. You want to follow up with meaning and have purpose behind it, and so if you're actually there for like a lot of this is timing, right? Like if you are consistently following up over a period of a year, right, and you follow up once per week and somebody else only follows up one time every quarter, well, your odds, statistically speaking, the odds of you closing that account are way higher, right? Because a lot of times we'll run into a brand and on the initial call, they're not ready to do anything yet, but they maybe were somewhat receptive to what you had to say. And so but just because they're not ready today, like rarely means that they're not going to be ready in the future. Like, we've closed some big deals where it's like they weren't ready at the time, they weren't ready on the next, but eventually they're ready.
Yeah, and also like there, just as much as there's an appropriate time, there's also an inappropriate time, right? So it's like if you are on your first call with a brand, I mean, you're not going to fly out to meet them, right? I think that actually would be have a counterintuitive effect because they'd be like, well, they wouldn't understand, right? So, but I think it all goes back to like building trust. Like that's the reason that we're doing that in the first place is because especially in the age that we are at, post COVID and things like that, where things have gone so much more digitally. Like it's just it adds such a level of trust and going above and beyond meeting a brand in person and being able to even if they're like you could convey everything over a Zoom, right? Because you can do that most of the time. But I think what it really comes down to is just going above and beyond, like making the effort because brands want to work with people, at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, for sure. And so what I would say is, a few people join in here, post any questions if you have them. But this will get posted back to YouTube. So like, why don't we just list out like three of like three of the most important things to close brand deals, right? Close brand wholesale, like close brand wholesale accounts, close brand exclusive. Like, if you have to boil it down to essentially three things that are going to make you stand out to the brand, because the reality is like a lot of people that are reaching out to these brands, a lot of they're just throwing money at them, right? Like we just closed a brand deal, a brand exclusive a couple of weeks ago. Um, who I sat down with face to face, and like everybody wanted the exclusive. He candidly told me, he said, everybody wanted the exclusive, but like, so it's like, how do you begin to compete with everybody? Is you stand out, and like you sound different, and the things that you say are different, right? Like everybody is just throwing money at these brands and telling them, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that, or like here's the like all these different, they're just vomiting things at the brand, right? But it's more so like we take the approach of actually listening, and then positioning ourselves as the expert, positioning ourselves to give them the value, once we understand their concerns, and then we provide the solutions, right? And so um, what would you say the top three things that are needed to close brand exclusives in today's competitive environment?
Yeah, I've definitely got the top two off the top of my head, which is to really go off of what you had just said, is to take a genuine vested interest in the success of the brand as opposed to the alternative, which is just throwing money at them or asking what they can do for you. Taking a genuine interest in the success of the brand. And the second one is following up because you're gonna leave 99% of people in the dust if you can simply follow up because most people can't do that. So that's definitely in my top two. I mean, I'm going back and forth on the third one, but in my opinion, I think that it's also following through with what you say because you can close a brand and then completely just lose the account, right? And we've seen that with sellers in the past where it's like we might lose the account to this other seller and then all of a sudden, a couple months down the line, the brand comes knocking on our door again because the other seller did not follow through. And so the work really starts once the account is closed as well. So, in my opinion, those are the top three, things about exclusives and closing accounts. I don't know if you have any other points to add to that or anything different.
I mean, I would just follow up with a question on the first one, which is you said like it's about showing a genuine vested interest in the brand. Like, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that actually look like in implementation?
I mean, so we always talk about like value, right? And we throw the word around so much, and I think that it can get kind of convoluted, right? And so I think it means providing them with value based on what they think is valuable. So, you know, we want to genuinely increase the sales of the brand and we want to genuinely help the brand because if they're dealing with you, they obviously have a problem. And so that's the issue that you're looking to solve. And so looking to solve the brand's issues, the brand's problems, I think is really taking a vested interest as opposed to just simply purchasing to solve your problem, which is you want to make more money. Right. So I think it's flipping the script on that and really looking at what their problems are and then offering solutions. I think is taking a vested interest in their products and their brand on Amazon, which most sellers are not doing, as we know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's about sounding different, you know, being different, um, and just doing what other people are not doing. Like I forgot I saw a statistic going around where it's like 42% of all e-commerce sellers, or I'm sorry, 42% of Amazon sellers hit six figures in sales. So that means, so essentially if you could survive the first 12 months of selling on Amazon, you're gonna, you're like, your statistical odds of becoming successful and running a successful Amazon business like are significantly higher, and you have a 42% chance that you're going to be running a six-figure business. I don't know what the statistic is for seven figure, but um, I would imagine it's pretty surprising as well. So it's like the longer you stay in the game, like the more opportunity there is, the better you get at your craft. And eventually you get in a position, if you're doing brand direct wholesale, you get in a position where it's like when brands have objections, you are so well equipped at handling them that you just calmly collect, you because a lot of times brands will start, spilling emotional problems, right? Like because they have a history of, a history of bad experiences with Amazon, and so you're able to over time confidently get very confident in your delivery, right? Which only happens by understanding the different pain points of the brand and understanding what the solutions are to those pain points, but most importantly, how to deliver those solutions in a way that is not just vomiting value at them, like just giving them a bunch of, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to optimize the listing, we're going to buy this amount of product. More so, it's about tying those value propositions to like the overall vision and the overall success of their company.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought of just now when you were referencing that stuff is there was a YouTube video that you had done, um, and we don't really like to, it's like the equivalent of uh, having a 4 hour morning routine to me, where it's like you're not getting anything done, right? We don't like to, I guess, over conceptualize. Like we like to implement, and we believe that implementation supersedes any of that other stuff, right? But um, the YouTube video that I'm referencing were all of the mindset things that we recorded about, you know, the pieces of advice video, basically. And the first piece of advice within that video was that paradigm shift that we were talking about. And if someone's listening, they don't know what a paradigm shift is. It's basically just a massive change in your way of thinking that affects everything else. And a lot of the times when you start brand direct wholesale or wholesale in general, you were taught to, based on content that's out there, based on just the industry knowledge, it seems like this real daunting thing where you are the one that is not in the power position, and you have to constantly chase after all of these brands. And the more you do this, the more you start to slightly shift your paradigm to say, no, no, I am not the one that is trying to chase after these brands. In reality, these brands have a problem and they need me. And I think the earlier that you can make that paradigm shift in your own mind, the easier it's going to make your outreach process. Because again, we don't look at things conceptually, we try to look at things very realistically and implementation wise. And so changing that mental shift, though, that conceptual, that paradigm, will actually affect your output in your outreach process. It definitely did that for us as we, started to shift our way of thinking when we're reaching out to these brands over the years.
Right. Yeah. Ready, fire, aim. I think is more effective than, ready, aim, fire in a lot of cases. We see sellers a lot in the beginning stage get stuck. They're in over analysis analysis by or paralysis by analysis, and it's like the more you're able to immerse yourself in the process of being on the phone, getting rejected, feeling what that rejection is like, and then learning from one call to the next. Like, think of the outreach process as, you know, like in your first 3 to 6 months of doing outreach, the goal, like for a new seller, should not be to close like a massive brand exclusive. The goal should literally be, how much can I learn from one call to the next? And so what I would, anybody watching, what I would challenge you to do is, when you build your list of leads, which should be, of course, you should be sourcing the right kinds of companies, right? We have a lot of videos on YouTube on how to do that. But assuming you have a list of companies that are in that small to medium sized range, and you make the call to them, right? And maybe you get rejected, or it's a certain situation, like write down uh, write down the main reason that they had for not letting you open that wholesale account, and do that for 100 calls. And so you should have 100 things written down, right? By the end of your list, 100 things written down of why they are not willing to work with you. And then see how many times those repeat themselves, those things, that those reasons for rejection, and the objections that they had. See how many times you see that over and over again on that list, and then focus on that rejection, right? And map that rejection to a solution, right? And so if the brand is, I don't know, common what's a common objection that a brand might have?
Their distributor network, they're tied into their distributor network and they can't disturb
So
their distributors.
yeah, so right, so basically they have a lot of different sellers on Amazon, and they
Yeah,
have
yeah,
strong ties with
exactly.
their distributors, and they can't tell their distributors who they can and can't sell to.
Basically, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, step number one is really, like, you will see like a lot of brands are in that situation. So step number one is really understanding what the actual landscape looks like, because brands oftentimes will see that on Amazon, like they think we have so many sellers, but when you actually put together a list of all the sellers on Amazon, and Amazon makes all this information public, business name, business address, and seller name, you can put a list together of all those different sellers for the brand, send it to the brand, and then the brand may be like, oh, we recognize all of them, or we recognize maybe 50% of them, and that's your starting point for um, getting an understanding of what the Amazon presence is like. And then you can begin to have a conversation with them about how they can actually, control their Amazon presence while still being respectful to their longstanding distributor relationships. But that's where the process starts. And so if you see that recurring issue, there's a solution to tie to it, right? Or if they have, pricing issues on Amazon, well, similar solution, because a lot of times if there's, everybody's violating MAP, it means there's a lot of sellers on the listing, right? Competition goes up, pricing goes down. So those are different ways you can approach it, but I would highly recommend somebody just writes down the most common objection for every call. Write down one objection, see what the most common is, tie it to a solution, and then get creative with how to deliver that solution.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, every brand thinks that they have the most unique problem in the world. And realistically, you know, almost all brands have the same issues. And you see it over and over and over again. And so, like, it just also makes me think too, we're talking about having problems and overcoming them and learning from them, especially in the beginning stages. Somebody that we have actually coached, I saw something that they had posted the other day about, a bad buy. And it was like, oh, I purchased this wholesale product. I bought it and, it wound up getting tanked and, sellers came on the listing and then it wasn't profitable for me. Right. And it was all like bad, bad, bad. And then at the end, it was the golden nugget in there, which was, but I learned and I'm going to do this, 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 and this different next time when I go into my next buy. And to me, like that's a win, right? Because you have to pay a price whenever you learn a lesson, right? whether you learn from somebody else who did it before you, which is the benefit of something like coaching or masterminds or something like that, or whether you pay the price yourself. And that was a small price to pay, and that's why we talk about being cautious and whatnot with test orders. But like in that scenario, I mean, it was a small price to pay for a big lesson. And so it's the equivalent of when you're on the phone, you get hung up on the call. Does it suck? Yeah, kind of, right? Do you eventually get numb to it? Yeah, you do. But it's a small price to pay for the amount you learn that you can then carry into the next call.
Right. Yeah. And I'd be curious, anybody seeing some people tap in here to, if you like, tell us where you are in your journey. Like, are you just starting? Are you brand new? You haven't sold a thing on Amazon? Are you, looking to scale? Like,
Yeah, we
are
did
you
a
doing
poll.
six figures, seven figures, right? Like, let us know where you're at so that we can tailor the information that we are giving you on these lives to your skill levels. But a lot of this stuff is applicable for all skill levels.
Yeah, we did a poll on Twitter about that, and I was very surprised at the amount of people that were, was in that six-figure mark, right? So, I mean, at that point, you've got the initial skill under your belt. You understand Amazon, you understand how it works, and you've made it past where most people drop off and quit, because it's not 2019 anymore. Not everybody's selling on Amazon, and the saturation, I think, is only there for the people that don't want to put in the effort. So if you're doing six figures and above, you're in that minority where you've actually stuck with this and you're starting to really treat it as a serious business, which it is, and I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in kind of in closing, like, what, key takeaways from this call, right? Like, what is a key to, somebody who's maybe starting brand direct, wholesale, trying to, contact brands, like, what would you say a key takeaway is that they can walk away from this, live and implement something?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, again, let's go back to viewing it conceptually first, which is that I think, and using this as a personal example, right? We always I don't want to say get down on ourselves, but we always are constantly chasing the next thing, saying, oh, we could be doing this or we could be doing better. Like, we're always going after the next thing. And sometimes it affects us in terms of being satisfied where we are right now. And I think that everyone to an extent kind of goes through that. And sometimes it's about just putting it in perspective. I'm tying this back to those 3 points that we said about what's going to separate you from another seller when reaching out to a brand, is that the majority of all sellers are not doing any of this, right? So I think that you can go into your next call with a brand and really just try and shift that paradigm, like I was saying, to realize that you are going above and beyond and doing what most sellers are not doing. And that should translate into a level of confidence. So for me, that's what I want, if someone's listening to this, to take away from the conversation, which is that you may not have the level of confidence right now, but you should. You should, because if you can mentally convince yourself to be confident, even if you're not, right? Like, it's going to translate into you actually closing deals and having better brand exclusive conversations. And then the second point for me is just to continue to learn, and mistakes are never mistakes if you can learn from them. And I think that's really, really big when it comes to brand direct wholesale.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Those are two good key takeaways. Someone can actually walk away and implement. One more reason that I think, because you said something earlier on that I just rethought of, one key reason that I think that can make you really stand out to a brand is in the early on in the conversation when they bring out an objection, a pain point. Most people's energy starts to get, their tension starts to rise and they start to get like defensive right? Most sellers, and they start like throwing, propositions at them. Oh, but do this, but do that, right? Like if you can just actually take a deep breath, gather yourself, and most importantly, label the brand's problem, right? And identify with the brand's problem and show empathy. So like one key way we do that is you say, if they say we're not taking Amazon sellers or we're not interested in online e-commerce, something like that, you just say, I completely understand where you're coming from, right? Many of our existing brand partners have experienced similar situations, right? And so you're empathizing with them. So you're immediately putting yourself on this in the same ballpark as them, but you're also, kind of throwing in a little bit of um, social proof in that by saying our existing brand partners, so that they see, okay, this seller actually, works with other brands. So I think that's a really good way to stand out early on in the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great takeaway as well.
Yeah. So, with that said, going live every week. So, guys tap in, ask questions. Um, and we'll be back in action probably next Tuesday. We got some good videos coming out for you soon. And we'll see you next week.
All right. See you next week.